Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about butterflies and black swans. Not the animals themselves, but the scientific theories of randomness that are named after them. And in fact, a wonderful story is when I initially gave this talk in February, 1 billion painted lady butterflies were flying through the streets of Los Angeles, which was totally random and incredibly beautiful. But we're not always that lucky. And the idea is that randomness is a fact of life, and we can't really predict or control the weather or whether we'll get the next job, but we can use these series to help us navigate that randomness and use our mindfulness in order to react positively to it. So the butterfly effect, if you're not familiar with it, was discovered in 1961 by a mathematician and meteorologist named Dr. Edward Lorenz, when he noticed that small changes in his initial calculations produced huge variances in the final outcome. And so the idea is that a butterfly could flap its wings in Brazil and set molecules of air in motion, which would set more molecules of air in motion, and on till those molecules of air could eventually cause a tornado in Kansas. So initially it was really only applied to weather, but then scientists noticed that really applied in our lives every day. And in fact, they gave it a formal name called the law of sensitive dependence on initial conditions. And so I'll give you an example from my own life. Back when I lived in New York, I had a friend who lived next to someone who represented the Australian Wheat Board. And unbeknownst to me, Australians love to travel since they live on the other side of the world, and especially come to New York. So he was asked many times to be able to stay there when people were traveling through. And so one day we all went out to dinner together, and he had a man staying there named Campbell Laird. And the amazing thing was we actually fell in love, and we've been married for over 20 years just on that meeting. So things can happen like that, and it's a really wonderful thing. But again, the idea is you can't really predict what the outcome will be. And I wanted to tell you two sort of historical stories that also indicate how this effect takes place. So the one you'll love, I think, if you're not familiar with it, is about the invention of Coca-Cola. So during the American Civil War, soldiers were given morphine to alleviate their pain, both on and off the battlefield, and inevitably they became addicted. And one of the soldiers, Lieutenant Colonel John Pemberton, was actually stabbed in the chest during a battle and was given morphine and became addicted. But he also happened to be a pharmaceutical chemist, and so he decided to tackle his own addiction. And he created an elixir called Lieutenant Colonel Pemberton's French Cocoa Wine, which was a long name, but it became very popular, and it contained the cola nut, cocaine, and alcohol. And it was positioned as something that could cure not only addiction, but also depression. And at that time, actually, cocaine was used in many beverages, even for children. However, he noticed it wasn't really curing addiction, so he did change the formula. He removed the alcohol, put in sugar, and renamed it Coca-Cola. And the rest is history. As you know, it's now one of the most popular beverages around the world. It did not cure addiction, no matter what he put in it. So that's something. But another great story is how wolves affected the entire Yellowstone Park. So in the 1920s, the Park Service noticed that the deer were declining in the park due to their predators. And so the Park Service decided to remove all of the wolves from the park. And obviously after that, the deer did thrive. In fact, they thrived so well that since they had no predators, they ended up overgrazing the park, and they never even had to migrate to other parts of the park since no one was, forcing them to. So as they ended up overgrazing, they took away all of the grasses and the aspen and the willows, and that led to the decline of other creatures in the park, such as the beavers. And once the beavers had no wood to build their dams with, then the rivers overflowed, and when the rivers overflowed, it killed other grasslands, and trees declined, and birds didn't come to the park anymore. So it was this huge domino effect. And so in the 1960s, they realized they should introduce the wolves back into the park. And within 6 years, it was amazing. The deer did not, the grass had a chance to grow back. The deer migrated to other parts of the park. The beavers had wood for their dams, which created new pools, which allowed wildlife to return, and the trees grew abundantly, and birds came back, and the park thrived just with this introduction. So again, you can see how small changes in initial conditions can lead to very large variances in the final outcome, and it's not always possible to see that up front. And that's a similar case with the black swan event, which is a term coined by Nassim Taleb after the 2008 financial crisis. And the idea with a black swan event is it is impossible to predict and has a very high negative outcome. So again, the reason that they call it the black swan event is that it has this negative outcome, and something similar to this financial crisis or the world wars, this is what he's referring to when he talks about black swan events. But the reason I bring it up is that he actually has a position as to how to avoid these. We can't assume that there will never be random chaotic events, but we can prepare for them. So the idea is to build infragile or robust systems that can handle chaos. And as we were discussing in our emotional time travel class, when you're an entrepreneur, you have this flexibility and adaptability, which is what Nassim Taleb is talking about, an ability to navigate and change position as need be depending on circumstances, and avoid fragile systems that are easily breakable. So when you look at the financial crisis, that was built on a house of cards. So it didn't surprise anybody in the end that it failed the way it did so historically. It just was something you couldn't predict. So again, the idea is to build a robustness into your life, and this flexibility, this awareness, this acceptance and acknowledgement, and the ability to pivot and change as need be. We don't need to prepare for Armageddon, but just know that it's a possibility, and know as we go through each day that we can use our mindfulness, our ability to be aware and look at things as they appear to be and not try and hide from them, and adapt as need be in order to build a robust life. And even though we can't necessarily predict whether we'll get that job, we can do our best to try, and if we don't get it, we know that's not the right job for us, and we'll get another job. And who knows, that next job may be the best job you've ever had. So having that outlook of knowing that you can navigate through the ups and downs. There's a wonderful phrase that I think of a lot, which is that a man is not judged by the heights he ascends to, but the depths he climbs out of. So let's keep that in mind and understand that butterflies fly free and could come back to Los Angeles at any time and bring their beautiful colors to the city. And we couldn't predict it, but we'll be thrilled when they do. So thank you so much.